Welcome to Still Growing in Grace. I'm Mike Zanker. Join me and other amazing guests as we explore and discover better, hope-filled perspectives on biblical texts and difficult themes. Prepare to expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, as well as Eastside Church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. Hello, and I'm taking a bit of a break here to chat with all of you who've been watching our program Still Growing Grace for almost a year. We're almost at the finished mark of our first year on the Grace Awakening Network. And this team that I've had the privilege of working with, all four of them have been phenomenal. Each of them share their hearts honestly, and it's a privilege to be with them. But I wanted to, first of all, ask you, are you being encouraged by this program? Let us know. We're not hearing from a lot of people, but those that do reach out, they're encouraged. But sometimes it's easy just to hear good stuff and just not respond. Oh yeah, that was good. Yeah, I heard about them. Oh yeah. Let us know. It actually means something to us and is the encouragement for us. We need encouragement too. Like, honestly, if we're encouraging you, then reciprocate, encourage us back, and let us know what you thought. Plus, support us. We could use the financial support to make this happen. This is not a free thing. We have to pay to be on the Grace Awakening Network, and we'll greatly value your support. Those watching in Canada, you can visit growinggrace.ca. There's a way to support there. Just click donate. And if you're in the States, you can visit eschurch.com and click donate. There's a box called Growing Grace, and just check that off and make a donation to that. Honestly, those little bits that come, even if it's just a one-time gift, consider making a donation. This will help us to consider going on for another year. We're looking at what's going to happen next year. Should we keep going? But we do need to hear back. So we're asking you to respond with emails and or financial donations just to make it happen. We don't ask much. We don't talk about it in any of our sessions. So this is a rare pause in our programming to ask you. If you want to find ES Church, they have Sunday services all the time. Lots of grace teaching, worth listening to. Fred's a phenomenal, gentle-hearted teacher. I love the guy. My church has we're live every Sunday as well at 9:55 Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. It's a relaxed kind of church, small church, but hey, sharing a message, and lots of people are watching us online. Then we have Bill Thrasher on Facebook is where you can find him. The Jesus Purpose is a private group that you can ask to join, and the articles there are so good. I love Bill, and he's very deep in his thinking, if you haven't caught that already. Randy Elstrott, he wrote a book called The Box You Can Put God In, worth picking it up on Amazon. Great book. It's phenomenal. And then, of course, Richard Murray, we've been listening with him, and I've interviewed him many times, has a number of books, and these are all free. Look at this. Like, they're all free. I believe it's called thegoodnessofgod.com. So if you would take time to look at those resources, join us on Facebook, comment, email us if you have any questions. We'd love to hear topics that you might be interested in hearing us talk about, but your feedback would be greatly valued. So once again, thank you for joining us and Still Growing Grace. We hope that today's episode will be really encouraging, and thanks for letting me have this little break in that's not quite normal. So until next time. All right, welcome back to Still Growing in Grace. I hope you're enjoying these unique topics that we've been covering lately, kind of dealing with the real, what do you do when the rubber hits the road, when things aren't great? Where's God in the pain? Where's God in the confusion, or in the frustration of my journey of learning and unlearning? I had a small group meeting this morning, and my group was talking about this is Romans 8:38 and 39. And it was kind of interesting that as we dissected that verse, that's the one that says nothing can separate us from the love of God, neither depth nor height or nor powers or anything like that. And it really caused a discussion around, where is Christ then? Because I remember a long time ago when I first started learning about Christ in me, fine, it was in me, but not in others. That's kind of where I lived. I could not see it any other way. But then I started to see other sections through the scriptures that kind of point to, wait, Christ holds all things together. There's no such thing as this separation, and yet it's everything I grew up with. I grew up with a dualistic mindset. I didn't even know it. I'm still trying to understand it. So that's what I'm hoping we can get into today. And I'll pull up Romans 8:38 later if there's time. But I'm going to invite you guys to tap in because I think you're all dealing with it as well. Don't all talk at once.
Well, I think that the illusion of separation, I think the devil is or satanic energies are often attack our unity and try to divide us. And one of the major reasons that darkness divides us is through this dualistic notion that includes some and excludes others. Dualism is basically that two things are on the same scale, two things are opposed to each other, and they're always out, always in, always black, always right, always love, always wrath. And then what we end up doing is sliding between the scale of those two things. And we can justify whatever mood we're in because, there on this scale, there's wrath and love. And, on this scale, there's us and them, and that's where racism, denominationalism, all these things come from, artificially dividing that which was never meant to be divided. Now, there's a wiser way to look at these differences. We do need to discern differences or discern blind spots, and that's one thing. But it's another to use language. I saw something the other week. In fact, I think this is where this idea for a phrase came from, is somebody was holding up a couple with their new child. And somebody commented on this thing, well, Dad, what a beautiful covenant family. And I was thinking, if I saw that and I had a young child and say I wasn't in some covenant named church or something or whatever, some covenant named theology, that would be very hurtful, to see that and say, well, okay, well, this family is obviously in the covenant. And these other implying that other families are not outside the covenant. I tell you what dualism really got me when my daughter, my oldest daughter, got chosen to be in the homecoming walk, and that was a surprise. And honestly, she's beautiful, but she was also into a lot of sin and things that people would make fun of her as well. She's got some emotional issues and that sort of thing. So she wasn't even sure if whether they were really making fun of her by even nominating her for that, or but she dressed up like a queen and went in there and just ate up the place, even though a lot of people were kind of looking out the side of their eyes at her. But I think that's one of the things. When that happened to me, I began to think about, what? Every girl is beautiful. And every time that we say there's a beautiful girl, what a beautiful girl that is, there's another girl that's not being called beautiful. And just that each girl is beautiful in their own way. And every time, so I try to purpose. I'm not always successful, but if I try to say something nice to compliment somebody, I check around for all the other females there and try to appreciate, whether I say it or not, but just appreciate, hey, I'm not singling out this beauty by elevating this person or moving them off to the side. And that could apply to anything. It can apply to, just other Christians, to pastors. It can apply to anything. And this language, I think one of the turnoffs that people have against Christianity, and then I'll be quiet, one of the turnoffs that people have against Christianity is that we're always us versus theming everybody.
Yep.
And we make them feel like they're lacking something. We make them feel, when we give them the old spiel that we're taught to give, whatever they are, whether it's unbelievers or false believers, or I'm so tired of that stuff, of thinking of people in those terms and separating in those terms. And just understand that we're all children of God. We all have blind spots. Praise God that we have a clear view of Jesus in some areas. We're growing. All of us are growing in that. And if we can help somebody else see Jesus, but they're in now. Everybody's in now. And I think if we start looking at everybody as a second Adam, we're not excluding anybody. We're welcoming. We should be seen as welcomers, not excluders. So that's the duality thing. Anytime we use labels, Kierkegaard said, when you label me, you negate me. And there's a lot of truth to that. But just staying away from this exclusionary language.
Well, we grew up with that. Like our churchianity was grounded in that. Like we're told as kids, do not hang out with non-Christians, do not date non-Christians, stay away from those that dance and drink and smoke and all that stuff. We were given all the lines to not cross. So that was like hardwired in. At least it was for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even within the church world, there's levels. So it's not only believer, unbeliever, but once you're in the church world and you're all saved or a believer, then there are believers who are
Good enough.
yeah, they're really good believers. They're hot, they're serving. And then there are the nominal believers who are not. Then there's the backslidden believer, and that person you didn't want to be.
Larry
In our
Norman,
little
backslidden.
Yeah, in our church, they would. It was so small in our small town when I grew up. Whenever the pastor would talk about the backslider in the congregation, everybody knew who it was. But it wasn't naming them, but we all knew who they were. So even in the kind of the Christian circles, there's a lot of us and them, even separate from the idea of us and them, saved and unsaved, believer, unbeliever. But I grew up with that heavy and abstain from all appearance of evil is a verse that comes to my mind when Richard was talking, because we were told we had to stay away from all appearance of evil, and that included people who would do what we considered evil.
Because Jesus might come back and you may not make it.
Yeah, and then
Sorry.
Well,
trauma.
Yeah, that's the trauma. Thanks for triggering that. But, one thing, real quick, Richard was mentioning. I honestly saw this. This was an article that a young lady had died in a car crash, a tragic accident. But it said this: it was even more tragic because she was so beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of dualistic thinking is everywhere.
Yep.
Fred, you talked about, even within the church, there's those layers of dualism. And I think about a term that, when I was in that culture, being on fire, that was like, was a real high level of good Christian. You're an on fire Christian. And so it set up competitions to see who could be the most on fire. And so, yeah, it's kind of crazy. I was thinking a long time ago, I had a good friend who was he was a professional artist, a professional painter. He was very, very good. And he's actually in Atlanta now, Bill. But he used to like go door to door and sell encyclopedias or something. And he said he was bored. It wasn't challenging him, and it was difficult. Just basically cold calls all day. And he said he went up to a door and he started to knock, and he heard. He's not a believer at this point. He's not a believer. He said he heard the voice of the Lord to tell him to stop it, go paint. And he stopped. He stopped what he was doing. And he went and started because he liked to paint, and he became a professional painter, and then he became a believer. But people challenged him on his testimony because you can't have heard the voice of God because he wasn't in you. He wasn't in you to speak to you, and that was a big deal for him because he now that he's a believer and he hears the voice of God, he knows that's the voice he heard. So, and clearly what the Spirit told him was correct, because he made a big career out of painting. And
Wow.
I was at at an early job in my early life. I was in a warehouse. I worked in a warehouse, and there was another believer who was sharing with people and that sort of thing. And so he and another guy walked up to me, and they were in an argument whether this other guy, who he deemed as unsaved, this other guy, he said, well, you're not a child of God. So this guy was saying, well, of course I'm a child of God. I'm a person just like you are. And so they came to me to settle their argument. All I can think of was what Paul said, that they were, all of these pagans were offspring of God. So I said that, and the Christian got mad at me. I mean, he was furious at me because it was like, you're supposed to back me up here. That's that duality.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think I've said this before. I mean, my catalytic moment, the moment where everything was like, oh man, everything I know is now changed, was I went to a church for the very first time. This is 15, 17 years ago, a new church. And the pastor there gave a message about the Garden of Eden and how this was really the key that unlocked all the scriptures. And it was said that in the very second story in the Bible, and these two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I think what's interesting is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's both, right? It's the duality thing, just like you talked about, Richard. And then you have the tree of life. And the irony is there's a duality outside of duality, right? There's a paradox here, that there's this duality of categorization. And in fact, in John 5:45, Jesus is talking about Moses being their accuser, right? He's talking about Moses being their accuser. And if you look at the word diablos a lot of times means accuser, devil, but that's not the word Jesus used in this. It's translated accuser. He said Moses is your accuser, and it's the Strong's word 2723, if you want to look up categoro, which is where we get our word category from Greek. He said, wow. Moses is your categorizer.
Wow.
He puts the labels on you. He puts you in buckets of right and wrong, good and evil. He's your tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then it even says, when Jesus was hung on the tree, that it was the law of Moses was nailed to the tree. So this law is the thing that categorizes us, that puts us in this mindset of, gnosis, that I can know good and I can know evil. And yet there's this weird other dualism that it's seated all over the scriptures. And it's just what I think is just so interesting. And in our world, maybe to give a metaphor, Richard, I know one of your favorite movies is The Matrix, right? This idea of the digitized mindset, this binary mindset, 1 or 0, right? There's only 2 digits, good, evil. And in the Matrix, you see the 1s and 0s coming down, right? It's just this categorized world, and everything fits in this. And the reality is we're talking on a format right now that's on the internet, and it's 1s and 0s flowing. It's all broken down and compressed into subsegments, and I'm an audio guy, and I know kind of how all this kind of works in the background, and it's fascinating. But what you're hearing from me now isn't true. It's chopped up pieces of truth, put into 1s and 0s, and then regurgitated back on the far end,
translated
into an analog medium. Though what's being sent from my mic right now, or my mouth into my microphone, are airwaves that are compressing a microphone. That microphone's taking that magnetic electronic signal, taking it, chopping it up, putting it in 1s and 0s, and sending it. I'm coming to a point, I promise.
It's good.
It's going through the internet, coming on your end, all through 1s and 0s, and then it's coming through a speaker that's moving air again and putting it back into an analog medium, this real energy, like legit energy. And when you understand the analog spectrum, we have everything from cosmic background microwave radiation, right, which is the very earliest forms of energy from the conception of our universe, all the way to matter. Matter is light, which is energy, slowed down to present. We are walking balls of energy that's just slowed down into coalesced matter. And everything between these spectrums of energy is an analog. There's a gradient between one end and another end, right? And I think what's interesting is, if you think about the Psalm, he's removed our sins as far as east is from west. This is the spectrum of duality that Christ brings, right? that there is a duality, but man, there's an infinite plethora of gradients between these infinite, reaches of Christ's arms, for lack of a better, image. And yes, there is a left and there is a right, but there isn't a left and a right. They just go. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong. I wrote that today. I don't know if you saw it. I just thought it was kind of ironic that we're talking about this today. And what I wrote this morning, it just came to me. Maybe it's a Holy Spirit thing. It says, almost everything you think you know inside of this world is simultaneously worse than you understand on one level, not as bad as you understand on another level, not as good as you understand on one level, and far, far better than you understand on the deepest level.
Yeah.
Arrogance scoffs at this proposition. Humility celebrates this realization.
It's
That's
interesting.
good.
That is good.
We've lost your video, Richard.
Oh, how do I get it back?
Turn it on.
There's probably a camera.
Oh,
Hey,
turn it
yay!
I love it.
Well, another aspect of the good and evil thing is that we've done the same thing to God's nature. We have projected duality onto his nature.
Absolutely.
So that we see him as being both good and evil. In other words, and by good, I mean loving, forgiving, merciful, but then also wrathful, angry, violent, all those things, the man of war, Old Testament calls him a man of war, and all these other things. And ordering, sending delightful plagues on people in Deuteronomy 28. And it's a list of nightmares in there. So, but one of the things is, because it's dualistic, we then don't know who God really is. We have a bipolar view of God. It comes from us engaging in duality.
Of course.
The whole Jesus thing, the Shema that Hebrew had, was that everything, the Lord our God is one. The second Adam is one. The creation is one. And every time that we see a second thing, that's when the trouble begins. Some mystic said that, behold but one in all things. When you behold a second, trouble comes. Something along those lines. But because then we start competing with these things, we start judging ourselves and others by these two standards, rather. And the tree of life, but look at that. That was the other tree. That was the tree where we're organic. We're in the moment. It's all by hearing, by ear. We play it by ear. We live by ear. We live by now. We live by his voice. There's no this or that, or this from that, or this and that, or this versus that. Randy, when you were talking a while ago about the competition, that's one of the big dualities that we all face, is competition with each other, which is really when we start talking about using inclusionary and exclusionary language. I'll never forget, I saw these boys playing soccer one time, and I went out to watch, and everyone on the field, all the boys on the field, were scared to death. They were missing the kicks, and they were running around. They were crying because they couldn't make a play. But the second string was on the sideline, and the second string was over there playing soccer against the fence, and they were having a blast because they weren't keeping score. All right, and I just think that's what this competition thing that we've got keeps us. We used to play football out in the yard all the time, me and the boys, and I was the quarterback, and I would always make sure they tied no matter what happened. We didn't play. Everyone played hard, but they didn't play to win. And even some of the boys would let the other boys catch up, what we were aiming to do was always tie, and that was a blast, and that's some of our best memories. Now listen, I'm also very competitive. And I've got my game face in the courtroom and there's a lot of duality. Man, you talk about duality in the courtroom. I live in duality.
I think that's the one cool thing about competition with Jesus. I don't know if it's cool. It may backfire on me, but there's a level set in this reality, and we all end up losers. We do. I think Capon says it a lot, right? Robert Capon says it in a business, like, we all end up dead. It doesn't matter if you're the richest billionaire on earth or if you're the sickest leper pauper in the corner. We all end up exactly the same, right where God does his best work, resurrecting.
Are you trying to say nobody gets out alive?
Well, let me flip that over with something C.S. Lewis said, and I think I shared this, Fred, last weekend, something to this effect, And what he was saying is when he would see people, he would just say, all I see is an immortal. He would say, every person, this is an immortal child of God right here. And all the respect that comes with that and from that we give. And that's how we esteem each other. So, yeah.
And I think that's the analog. That's the analog, right? It's it's Schrodinger's cat. We're both dead and we're both alive. Right? But then, like, seriously, that's there's where physics ties into theology, and then there's some reality that I am a walking mortal and I'm a walking immortal.
Yes.
And on that analog spectrum, I can be anywhere in between of those in my cognizance at any point in time.
Yes. Amen.
I think Jesus pulled it out of a hat a couple times when he confronted people's expectations, because even the disciples were trying to be on the right side of things with Jesus, and they thought the right side was taking over Rome, and Jesus had to keep correcting them. Or they were looking back in their history and they remember Elijah calling down fire. So they thought, I want that. I'm going to try to be like Jesus. Let's call down fire. And he's saying, you don't know what spirit you're of. Now, that does not mean they were now evil spirits. It means they were of the category of Moses, which I love. That was really cool, Bill.
That was.
Yeah, I got to remember that. I don't want to forget that one. Because there's a lot to unpack in that. Maybe in our second half, our next conversation, we can dive further into it. But this idea of dualistic thinking, us versus them, which we just finished saying there's even layers within those layers. So in the church world, if it's a believer, we have the just in by the skin of their teeth believers who they just make it. And then you have the top believers who are really working hard for God. But the same thing in our non-believing world, we have those we've raised up to be beautiful, well off, all that stuff. And everybody else doesn't matter as much. And it's a sick system. And we're seeing it in our politics right now. But this is the world Jesus asked us to step out of and not live of this world, but to live of the spiritual world that we are in, right?
Bingo.
So that's pretty cool. Let's wrap this one up, and then we'll come back and continue this conversation. I think this topic is really important. So hopefully you'll join us next time as we continue this conversation on Still Growing in Grace. Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. If this show's been an encouragement to you, consider making a donation today. For our Canadian link, visit growingingrace.ca, and for our USA link, visit eschurch.com. Your donation will help us continue spreading really good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.